the first thing I'd like to talk about at the beginning of each of my final negative speeches is how if any new claims are brought up by the affirmative team in their following speech, they should be disregarded, as the negative team does not have another speech to respond to them. So they cannot bring up new evidence or new arguments in their final speech. Now, the second thing I'd like to talk about is our goal of justice. It simply is inherent in the name of the criminal justice system that the goal is justice. It's our nation's justice system, therefore the goal should be justice. They're changing the criminal justice system, that should be their goal. Now, the next thing I'd like to talk about is I have 3 voting issues in today's debate round. If any of these voting issues flows negative, we believe that the round should flow negative as well. The first is that their plan will not work. If it does not work, it shouldn't be passed. The second is they don't know what their plan does. If they don't know what a plan does, it shouldn't be passed. And the third are the disadvantages. If the disadvantages outweigh the advantages, then a plan should not be passed. So if any of these flow to the negative team, we believe the round should flow negative as well. Let's first go to why their plan won't work. The first thing is, once again, the no incentive to rehabilitate. Now, they've said, look, this expert has said there's incentive to rehabilitate. However, it's incentive to rehabilitate temporarily. Incentive to rehabilitate just long enough that you can get out on parole. It's not incentive to actually rehabilitate fully. It's incentive to act better temporarily so that you can get parole. The incentive is actually flawed. It doesn't provide the incentive. They say the second is that parole clearly failed back when we had it. That's the reason why we got rid of federal parole in the first place. As once again, David B. Morehouse said, the concern over high crime rates and failed rehabilitative model of corrections led federal governments to reform their correctional systems. Earlier releases through parole were abolished and replaced with supervised release. This is exactly why we got rid of federal parole in the first place, was that it was failing miserably. Now, the second thing we'd like to talk about is how it has failed in the states. We've talked about numerous states. We read a study from 11 states that said those are failing. Then we read other states in addition to that. And in all of these states, parole is failing, and there's no reason to believe that it'll work better on the federal level. They said, well, these states are out of whack. There's no reason to believe that federal parole wouldn't be out of whack as well. Next, they talked about Michigan, and they said, look, Michigan has parole, and they have a low recidivism rate and compared to the rate of the United States. However, they didn't compare Michigan when it had parole to Michigan when it didn't have parole. This would be the way to compare, not Michigan to other states. You need to compare Michigan when it has parole to Michigan when it doesn't have parole. The next thing is vagueness. They have no idea what their plan does. They said, oh, well, there's no way to know this. Well, that's a significant problem if there's no way to know exactly what your plan does. They should know the criteria for letting people out on parole. They should know the criteria for hiring people. They should know how many people they're going to have to hire. They should know the cost. These are all things that could be known, but they simply don't know. Once again, if you don't know what a plan does, there is absolutely no reason to pass it. There are simply too many vague issues in the affirmative plan. They said they're passing a bill, but we don't know what that bill does. Now, the next thing I'd like to address are the disadvantages, the reason why their plan would actually harm more than the status quo. The first is because people aren't rehabilitated in the states, or back when parole originally existed, they won't be rehabilitated when parole is reinstated at the federal level. As we said earlier, crime dropped after parole was abolished. And so if they reinstate parole, crime will rise again, and this is a significant disadvantage. Now they said, look, it actually spiked 10, 15 years after parole was abolished, but they didn't actually bring up any evidence on this point. They have never actually countered our evidence that parole, or the abolishment of parole, dropped crime. Now, the next thing that they heard, they were all happy about the Constitution. They say the goal of the judiciary branch should be to uphold the Constitution. However, they don't uphold the Constitution. They don't uphold separation of powers. Because they're allowing the executive branch to make judiciary decisions, they're not actually upholding the Constitution or separation of powers, so they don't uphold their own goal for the criminal justice system. The third is that justices should decide justice. That's why they're called justices. This is what they're an expert in, is deciding what a sentence is. This is the main job of a justice, is to decide how long a person's sentence should be. It doesn't make sense to transfer this to the executive branch. The President's branch is not designed to uphold justice. That is what the judiciary branch is, the justice branch. But they're moving this to be under the executive branch. The fourth disadvantage is the startup cost. Time and time again they said, our plan saves money in the long run. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the initial startup cost to hire these people that they will have to have as parole officers, to hire more people to determine who will get parole, to hire all these people, and they don't know how much this will cost. And this startup cost has to come from somewhere. They said, oh, it will come from the Parole Commission, which already has money. But they brought up no evidence saying that the Parole Commission would have enough money to actually fund this. So they won't be able to fund their plan. It won't work because it doesn't provide an incentive to rehabilitate. They have no idea what their plan does. It would actually increase crime and violate separation of powers, and therefore I urge you to in no way vote for parole in today's debate round.